Well, welcome back to week 2 of this month's Sizzling Summer Series, where we lighten up a little bit in the summer. If you know, you've been around here for a while, you know we always do some fun things. And this summer, we are exploring Australia as we are following the adventures of Dory and Marlin and the gang in the Disney Pixar classic movie, Finding Nemo. Finding Nemo. Our theme this month is inclusion in action, and it's the exploration of the spiritual truth of oneness, which is basic core concept of the science of mind that we teach. And today my talk is, do you know who you are? Do you know who you are? Now, if you remember from last week, we left off where Nemo had been captured by the diver and put on the boat, and the boat was speeding away, and Marlin, his dad, was chasing after the boat, but he had just lost the boat, and now he runs into Dory. Literally runs into Dory. She's a blue tang fish, and she immediately tells him that she has short-term memory loss. And he thinks, well, that's okay. She's willing to help me go find my son. She said she saw the boat. This is great. So they start going together. Well, he quickly learns that her short-term memory is a challenge, and that she even forgets who he is and thinks he's chasing her instead of following her. And he's like, well, this is not going to work. I'm going to have to go on my own. You're delaying me now. And he turns to leave, and right there is Bruce, the great white shark. And Bruce invites them to a little get-together he's having. Well, Marlin's pretty sure the get-together is lunch, and he's on the menu. But Dory says, it's a party? And he says, well, yeah, something like that. And she says, I want to go. Let's go. And he goes, super. So he scoops them up in his fins and starts swimming them off to the sunken submarine where their party is going to happen. And as they get there, you see a minefield of the old mines on the chains floating. And Dory says, balloons! It must be a party. They've got balloons. And Bruce says, yeah, but you don't want to mess with those balloons. They will explode on you if you do. So they get into the sub, and we meet Anchor and Chum, Bruce's buddies. And it turns out that their little get-together is actually a 12-step meeting. And their pledge is, fish are our friends, not food. Fish are not food. They're our friends. And so Bruce says his piece, and then they invite people from the audience to come up, and Dory is all excited. She says, pick me, let me go, pick me. So she goes up front, and she talks and says her testimony, and then they invite Marlin to come up, and he's like, I don't have anything going on. And they say, denial, right? And so he finally begins to talk about his son, and he's searching for his son, and he sees out in the distance a goggle, a mask, a diver's mask. And he recognizes it as something that had fallen off of the boat that took Nemo. So he immediately says the mask, and he goes swimming off towards that, and Dory goes with him, and they tussle over the mask a little bit, and they get tangled up in it, and it snaps loose, and it pops Dory right in the nose. And she gets a nosebleed, and there's blood in the water. And Bruce freaks out. He goes crazy. Just one bite. And he's chasing them all over the sub and all over the place. And during the chase, he runs into a missile, and it launches, and it hits one of the mines. And the entire minefield goes up. The entire minefield goes up. Big explosion. And then we flash to Sydney. We're in the big city now. We're in Sydney, where Nemo is being dropped into a tropical fish tank, screaming for his dad. Help! Who are these fish? Who are these characters? They seem to have pretty familiar human traits, don't they? And we understand it. It's not foreign to us. Marlin is the distraught father searching for his kidnapped son. And we see lots of movies and books and things with this theme of someone being taken. Unfortunately, we see it in the news headlines even. And the drama that's associated with that. Dory and her short-term memory, we hear about that daily. Bruce is the classic bully. He's a classic bully. And then there's his buddies, Anchor and Chum, and their surprising 12-step meeting and then falling off the wagon. And we've heard those stories. They're familiar to us. So we can relate to these roles and these personalities because they exist in our common unity, the common consciousness that we exist in. We couldn't recognize it otherwise. For me, Dory really demonstrates the idea of oneness and inclusion. She includes everybody. When Bruce invited them to the little get-together, she said absolutely. She assumed she was being included. She was being invited to something. She said, yes, of course, I'll go. I'll be a part. The mines in the field, in her mind, were balloons. They were balloons, right? She wasn't making them something mean or evil or weird. They were balloons. They were fun. They were part of the party. We see her compassion and her empathy and her acceptance of others throughout this film. And she was the first one to accept the invitation to go up front and speak. Pick me, pick me. Life and everything in it is good for Dory. Life and everything in it is good for Dory. But what about Nemo? He's just been dropped into a new fish tank, out of the ocean into a fish tank. He's never been there before. And it's in a dentist office, and he's surrounded by strangers in the tank that he doesn't know who they are. And I found it interesting that the creators picked a dentist office for this fish tank. Most of us have a certain amount of anxiety, maybe a little fear about the dentist office, so we can empathize just the dental office with his experience of fear in the tank. We can empathize with that. And then we meet the dentist diver himself. And he tells his patient, I saved that little clownfish. He was struggling to survive out there on the reef. Wow. Projection. Nemo wasn't struggling, was he? He was on a field trip with his schoolmates. He was having fun. He was being brave. He was exploring. But the dentist projected on him his beliefs, didn't he? Our book of the month that Diane was telling you about, A Course in Miracles, and it teaches that about projection. And Alan Cohen tells a story in the book about the early days of motion pictures. And there was a film taken out to a ranch for some cowboys to see, and it was a Western. And in the movie, well, they told him to put up a white sheet on the wall to show the movie on. So they did. They turned down the lights, and everybody gathers to watch this motion picture on the sheet. And there comes to the scene where the cavalry is riding through, and the Native Americans are attacking. And the cavalry is in jeopardy. And this cowboy stands up, and he fires 6 shots right at the sheet. The lights come up, everybody's laughing to just see a white sheet with 6 holes in it. This cowboy had projected himself right in that movie. He wanted to be the hero, didn't he? He wanted to save the cavalry. He had projected himself right in. A Course in Miracles suggests that the world we see is a projection of our thoughts and that our experiences spring from our environment, not our environment, not the external. And we get that mixed up sometimes, don't we? We think that we're reacting to what's going on out there when really what's going on out there is reacting to what's going on in here. The quote from A Course in Miracles, projection always sees your wishes in others. Projection always sees your wishes in others. What are we assuming about and projecting on others in our lives? Marlin assumed that Bruce, the great white shark, was going to eat him, didn't he? He projected that right on him. Whew, shark's going to eat me. Nemo assumed that the occupants of the tank would hurt him. Remember, he'd always been told the ocean is a dangerous place. They were projecting their fears and their beliefs on that external environment. Ernest Holmes, the founder of the Centers for Spiritual Living and the author of The Science of Mind, tells us a principle is not bound by precedent. Everything exists in the field of infinite possibilities in this now moment. And not being, spiritual principles not bound by precedent. Just because it happened this way doesn't mean it has to happen that way again. Anything is possible in this now moment. Anybody familiar with contracts? In the contract, usually it has a little clause in there that says that this supersedes any prior agreement. Anything that may have been verbally said. If your salesperson told you this car has never been wrecked, it's brand new and the odometer is 100% correct, but in the contract it tells you it's been wrecked 3 times and the odometer was reset twice and we don't know what the real mileage is. Which is going to hold? The contract, right? And that's similar to this. Nothing before binds. And it's sort of like Dory. It's sort of like Dory, who lives in the now moment. The shark showed up and she said, I'm going to your party. She didn't go into past fear. Just because historically those sharks have been fish eaters doesn't mean this one is. And just because a place is unfamiliar doesn't mean it's dangerous. I know that's how our brains are wired though, right? And that's how we've all learned, and that's how we've grown. We take those experiences and we file them away, and this is a dangerous thing. I can't ever do that again. But doesn't that make our world get smaller and smaller and smaller and more limited? Because we're shutting things out. We're making a decision about those things, and that is how it is. It's black and white, and it's never going to change. And we set up these limitations then in our lives, and we make our world very small. Let's go back to Dory. She didn't immediately assume that Bruce was going to eat her. She assumed he was inviting her to a party, that she had been included. How much, how many things are we excluding that are really just projections of our beliefs, our thoughts, our fears? How much are we projecting on other people? Nemo. Remember in the beginning, last week we talked about how Dad always said that Nemo had a bad fin. He couldn't swim well. He even told Mr. Ray, his teacher on Nemo's first day of school, to treat him differently. Treat Nemo differently. When the class is all swimming, Nemo needs a break. Let him rest for 5 or 10 minutes. He doesn't swim as well as everybody else. Nemo was somehow less than those other kids, and Dad wanted to make sure the teacher knew about that. So let's go back to the fish tank in the dentist office. Nemo's just been deposited. He's getting to know the others in the tank. They're getting to know him, and the dentist stops by, and he says, well, little guy, talking to Nemo, you're going to be my niece Darla's next birthday present. And all the fish go, ooh. Nemo says, what? What is it? And they said, well, she killed her last birthday present. Chuckles the goldfish. Because she was shaking the bag so much, she killed him. And that scared Nemo so much, he got frantic. He was swimming around the tank, and he swam too close to the filter, and he got sucked right up in the tube. He's stuck. He's stuck. And all of the other fish go up to help him. And all of a sudden, anybody seen The Godfather, that spooky music they play? Imagine that. And out swims Gil. He says, don't touch him. They all back away. Gil swims up to Nemo, and Nemo says, can you help me? He says, no. You got yourself in there. Get yourself out. The other fish whine, Gil. He goes, I just want to see him do it, okay? So he swims up to Nemo. And he says, calm down. Alternate wiggling your fins and your tail. You can get out of there. Nemo whines, but I can't. I have a bad fin. Gil, in that gravelly Godfather voice, says, never stopped me. And he turns, and we all see he's got a bad fin too. Well, Nemo gasps when he sees Gil's bad fin. And so he begins to squirm and grunt and moan and wiggle and jiggle and do all sorts of things, and he pops out of there. Gil smiles. The rest of the fish are celebrating him and his success of getting out on his own, by himself. How frequently do we see that story? The underdog, always told that they're less than, not good enough, not strong enough, not smart enough. You can't do it. Don't compete, right? Until they get that coach or that teacher that sees that brilliance and that magnificence within them, that encourages them to allow that to be revealed, and they see how magnificent that they truly are, regardless of what they've been told. We see this in Nemo. Nemo is enough. He can take care of himself. He can get out of that. Ernest Holmes, he said, if we want to be free from suffering, we have to stop inflicting it. If we want love, we have to love, no matter what anybody thinks of us. If we no longer want to be condemned, we must no longer condemn somebody else. Without harm, without hurt, we may liberate ourselves and help to liberate others, lifting ourselves by the power of our creative imagination to the consciousness of the omnipotence of good and the omnipresence of the living Spirit. In effect, he's saying we must be the change we wish to see. In our book of the month, A Course in Miracles Made Easy, Alan Cohen tells a story of a friend of his who's really living the course. And it's brief, and I just want to read it to you this morning. While my friend and avid ACIM, A Course in Miracles, student Cliff Klein was watching television in the living room of his Brooklyn apartment, he heard a strange noise in the bedroom. He rose to investigate and found a burglar creeping in from the fire escape. When the intruder saw Cliff, he turned and began to flee. "Wait," Cliff called to him. "You don't have to run. I'll help you if I can." Stunned, the burglar stopped and slowly stepped back into the room. Cliff asked him what was going on in his life that had made him turn to stealing. The fellow told him that he had been fired from his job and lost his girlfriend. He felt powerless and angry and didn't know how he was going to pay the rent. Cliff invited the fellow to sit down and offered him a cup of coffee. Then he gave the young man some words of encouragement and handed him some cash, saying, "Come back if you want to talk some more." The fellow thanked Cliff and departed through the front door. A call for love. It can be challenging to remember that we always have a choice between love and fear in any given situation. Experience, education, society tells us that fear wins. We should always go with fear. Our egos insist on it. But the higher ideal, the spiritual truth, is that love wins, always. Love wins. We saw it in the tough love and kindness that Gil expressed to Nemo, choosing loving kindness in the form of knowing that Nemo could take care of himself, get himself out of that tube. Gil knew that they would empower the kid, that he wasn't weak and incapable. He wasn't reinforcing that ideal that Nemo had been told. Ernest Holmes, in his wonderful book, Can We Talk to God? Should it seem strange, then, that we who are engaged in the search for self-discovery should say that the spirit of humanity is rooted in a common unity, one universal presence? Surely we have an adequate foundation upon which to build not the hope, but the assurance that each one of us is a God thought in the germ. We are capable of that greater self-discovery. We're each capable of that revelation of that magnificence for ourselves. Sometimes we have a coach or a teacher or a mentor or someone that helps us to discover that, but like our reading this morning in this story, we have the ability to do it for ourselves as well. I want to close us today with our spiritual practice for this week. And if you haven't already signed up for our Mindful Monday email, you can do so either in the lobby if you're here in the room, or those of you at home can send an email through the website to me and I'll add you to the list. And this is just not an update, it's a follow-through of today's talk, our notes and quotes, and a little bit more on the spiritual practice if you would like to have that. This week I only have one practice for us, but I'm going to encourage you to really consider this. I invite us all to consciously choose love over fear. Consciously choose love over fear. In any situation where you feel riled up, anxious, angry, threatened, challenged in any way. Anybody felt that way? Oh, yeah. A newscast, a conversation with family or friend, a political ad. Lots of those out there today. Anything at all that you feel it coming, stop. Ask yourself, how can I respond as love in this situation? How can I respond as love? Where is this situation creating fear in me or in that person? Where am I projecting? Where am I projecting my beliefs on that? Is that even true? Where are they projecting? Where is that just simply a projection? Can I be the sane one in this moment who chooses love over fear? How do we do this? What's it look like? Rather than responding in defense, respond in love. Remember the story of Cliff the burglar. It doesn't have to be that risky at first, but it might feel that way. It might feel that way the first time that you don't engage in an argument, the first time you don't defend yourself, the first time you don't make them wrong. Right? It might feel that way. At the end of the day, when you're doing your gratitude journal, wouldn't it be nice to not have anyone to forgive, anyone to ask forgiveness from, but just to be able to write down, today I chose love? I've practiced this a few times this week, and I will confess it is amazing when I remembered to do it. Okay? Life was easier. Life was more peaceful. It was serene. It was joyful. The moments where I felt that I had made that choice, I watched life move on. There was a moment when something happened, I felt the reaction, and I stepped away from it. And the other person had no reaction. There was no intention behind it. I was making the intention. I was projecting their intention for what they were seeking to make happen in that moment, and it simply wasn't true. It's very powerful to be an observer in that situation. I didn't die. They didn't die. Nothing blew up. Everything was fine. But I'll warn you, your ego won't like this process at all. It wants you to win. It wants you to get in there and fight. Defend yourself. Be right. It won't like it at all. If you commit to this practice, be prepared. The universe will support you and provide you with many opportunities to practice. So be prepared. So today we're going to leave Nemo and his friends in the dentist's office fish tank, plotting their escape from the tank back into the sea. So be sure and join us next week as we continue this adventure. I want to close today with a quote from the movie from our little friend Dory. And she says, when life gets you down, you know what you got to do. Just keep swimming. This week, let's be love and keep swimming. Would you join me for prayer? How good it is to gather in the one, to remember and to recall and to recognize that there is only one, one power, one presence, one life. And that life is my life now and the life of each one of us gathered here this morning. For we are all one, united in the wholeness and the truth of God, in the truth of Spirit, in the truth of love. And knowing that simple, elegant truth, united in love, I speak my word for and about each of us, knowing the absolute perfection of life through us and as us, knowing that as we are each on this journey of self-discovery, that we embrace it, and the opportunity is, as Ernest said, the opportunity for self-discovery, the joy in the path, the expansion and the connection back into our very own center of conscious awareness of the truth of who and what we are, spirit and form. Expressing more of the divine through this leading edge of consciousness that we are. I know for anyone this day that has anything on their heart that they are seeking prayer around, that as they lift it into the consciousness of this prayer, that whatever needs to be revealed is revealed with ease and grace. Whatever needs to be healed is healed. A return to health, our natural state. I know abundance and flow and prosperity. I know joy, and I know love. So as we move forward in our week ahead, I know that each of us is grounded in love and allowing the fear to be at bay as we step forward in loving relationships, loving kindness to each other, and most especially to ourselves. And how joyful I am, filled with gratitude for this knowing that this is the truth of who and what we are and who we have come here to be, revealing the magnificence of the essence and the presence of the one. So I release this into law, knowing that it is done, and we affirm together by saying, and so it is.